What is up, Cowboys Nation? How's everybody doing tonight? Thursday night, Mike Tag is out of the building. He is off making the money, cashing the checks, shaking baby's hands, and all that good stuff. But I got my boy
What's
Greg
up?
to join me here on Thursday night and bring you guys some. We're gonna sit here and we're gonna talk Cowboys football with you tonight. Greg, how you doing?
I'm doing good, Kelly. How you doing, man?
Man, I can't complain. I'm still a little bitter. That all this media hoopla that's going on in Vegas and none of it really surrounds the Dallas Cowboys. It's all about the Chiefs and the Niners. So I'm still a little sour that we're not in that game.
Yeah, I am too, man. I have
But
all week long. I've been avoiding watching any kind of Super Bowl party, get-togethers, Super Bowl previews, ESPN, Sports Center. I just can't get to it right now. I still, yeah, I watch the Super Bowl, but everything in between for the last 2 weeks, I've been avoiding it.
yeah, no, I hear you. Well, we actually just got some breaking news here. Just 20 minutes ago, the Dallas Cowboys just hired Mike Zimmer as their defensive coordinator.
There it is. There it is.
Um, yep. So the defensive that happened. It looks like that was tweeted 20 minutes ago. Just saw it in the chat. So Gamer and Baller, thanks for putting that up there. So we got ourselves a new defensive coordinator. Looks like what Mike Zimmer is going to be the guy. They had talked about bringing in another guy from the Jets to interview him, the safety coach from there, Manuel was the last name, Manuel. Doesn't look like they're going to end up bringing him in after all. I guess they decided that Mike Zimmer was their guy. So early thoughts, I'll let you go. Greg, what do you think about the hire with Mike Zimmer? We kind of covered it a little bit the other night, but just give us a rehash on what's your opinion on Mike Zimmer and what he's going to bring to the table with this Cowboys team.
I think it's a good hire. But word was over the week that Jerry wanted Zimmer, but McCarthy wanted Rivera. Now, why? They didn't go into details. Some AZ Sports put it out there and reported it. But Jerry wants Zimmer because of familiarity. Zimmer's been with the Cowboys in the past, and Ron. I don't know if Ron is burnt out or if Jerry doesn't have that familiarity with him. That's why he decided to go with Zimmer. And Zimmer does have a pretty good record on defense. Head coaching is a different story, but I'm good with it. I guess I'm at that point in the game where I kind of wish we went younger and somebody more aggressive. And if
Yeah.
Jim Schwartz was available, but he just signed with Cleveland last year, if he was available, that would have been a good pick on defensive coordinator. But it is what it is. Zimmer, I think Zimmer's going to do a good job. I hope so.
Yeah, and I think what most Cowboys fans feel, and I know speaking for me personally, but I feel like it was the sentiment amongst a lot of other Cowboys fans was just that Zimmer feels like kind of like an all too familiar path that the Cowboys seem to travel. They like to go with guys that they're familiar with. They like to go with guys that have been tenured in the league for long periods of time. And I won't necessarily say that's a bad thing. I mean, you look at Spagnuolo, defensive coordinator for Kansas City. I mean, one of the best. They got the number 2 defense in the league. So you some of these guys like that are just they're defensive gurus. And when you're talking about a guy like Mike Zimmer, he's one of those guys that falls in line and he has had good defenses throughout his time. He has always brought an intensity to that coaching staff. He's a guy that's going to be intense. He's a guy that's going to hold his guys accountable. And I'm not going to say that Dan Quinn didn't do that, hold his guys accountable. But Zimmer is a little bit different kind of a coach. I think DQ, in my opinion, just from the outside looking in, is a little bit more of a player's coach. And I think Zimmer is less of a player's coach and more of an X's and O's kind of get on. If you're not doing your job, you're going to hear about it. But you're right. I mean, throughout Zimmer's time, he's coached some really good defenses. He had some really good defense. Had the number 1 overall defense in Dallas when he coached in Dallas back in the early 2000s. And when you look at those rosters, they weren't really littered with a ton of talent. I would argue that, talent-wise, I would say this is probably one of the most talented teams that Zimmer will be a part of. Steve mentions here, he says Zimmer has a ring. And Edgar says, I personally think this is not the best hire. He can't get past Kyle Shanahan. We're going to have to play the Niners in the playoffs. I don't know. That's just my opinion. And that's the thing people have talked about, the whole Mike Shanahan tree of assistant coaches. Yeah. That's one of them things that Dan Quinn just seemed he couldn't get it right. Mm-hmm. And Zimmer has had his. But again, different roster. He's got a lot of talent here. And, we're gonna see what happens. We still got free agency. We've got the draft. Hopefully they give Zimmer the reins and let him kind of bring his own guys in and add his pieces to the defense. Now the question comes, are they gonna switch up defenses? Are we gonna see them stay in the 4-3? I think Zimmer is traditionally a 4-3 guy, is he not?
Yeah, he started with a 3-4, and then he adjusted to a 4-3 later because I guess he realized that 3-4 wasn't getting enough on the pass rushing, so he went to a 4-3, and he was pretty successful too.
Yeah. So I would think that we'd probably, that's probably what they're going to stick to. I know there was some talks about wanting to go to a 3-4 versus a 4-3 for Micah Parsons' sake, is what I've heard. The 3-4 would be, less wear and tear on Micah. He's not getting hit. So I guess we'll see. I mean, when it comes down to it, I don't think Zimmer's necessarily. I don't think he's a bad hire. I like you said. I think he's had some good things, done some good things with his defenses. But of all the guys that were out there wasn't a whole lot of guys that were really hot candidates. Right. I guess that you would say. I was thought that the Cowboys had done a good job bringing in a wide variety of candidates versus just honing in on one. But it almost kind of felt like it was Zimmer all the way. Mm-hmm. Did you not kind of get that same feeling?
Yep, I did. I kind of felt like Zimmer was the leading candidate, like I said, because of familiarity. And Jerry, I didn't know at that time that Jerry really wanted him, but Zimmer is a disciplinarian. He really is. And Dan Quinn was a player's coach. He was successful, and the guys felt relaxed. But maybe they relaxed a little bit too much. And now they need to come and be disciplined on playing their game. And Zimmer will do that to the extent that Zimmer can get to be a beast and rub some of the players the wrong way. But if you came there to play and you came there to put it all on the field, he'll show you that respect. But they have to bring their A game now, because it's just like them starting the team for the first time, because Zimmer's a new defensive coordinator and he ain't taking no mess.
Yeah, and so with that we usher out the Dan Quinn era, and the Mike Zimmer era begins as far as defensive coordinators. So the first thing that I look to when a guy comes in like that with Zimmer, the first thing I look to is how, if anything, will this defense change? And what I would say is the first thing that I think we might see a little bit of a drop-off is we might see a drop-off in turnovers. I feel like the Dan Quinn's defense was big on turnovers. They were a turnover-heavy defense, but they also, I felt like, lacked a little bit of accountability on the back end at times because of their propensity to gamble for the takeaways, for the home run plays. And there was times where when that defense, we saw it against some of the better teams, if they didn't get the takeaways, that defense didn't look like one of the top defenses in the league. If they didn't get the takeaways, and if they weren't getting to the quarterback, which, obviously if you're not getting to the quarterback, it makes a long day for your DBs, but we saw a little bit of that with DQ. I think with this defense, what Zimmer brings to me is more accountability on the defense. And I think you'll see a more physical defense. I don't think this defense ever looked very physical. Mike Zimmer's defenses are physical defenses. Their defense is going to be out there. They're going to hit guys, which is what you like to see. If you're looking at defenses like the Chiefs or the Niners, how they go out and they play with the physicality and they bring that physicality to the field. So from your opinion, Greg, what is the biggest thing you're looking for as Zimmer coming in as the defensive coordinator? What are you looking for him to instill on this defense, year one right away?
Well, I want him to be creative, because I don't want him coming in with that old school mentality, because it's starting to wane out. And everybody knows the old school defense. And I don't want him coming in there being very predictable. I want him to be a little bit creative and open up his mind a little bit. But it's going to rely on linebackers. We have to get some linebackers, either good linebackers in the draft or we get some in a trade or free agency, because linebackers are essential to a Zimmer defense. Without those bona fide linebackers back there, you got a big gap from the defensive line to the cornerbacks and the DBs, and you have nothing in between to stop the run after they get past that first defensive lineman. So Zimmer's going to have to be creative. I hope over this period of time, Zimmer has been able to watch the NFL, watch some of these other people, like you said, Spagnuolo, watch Jim Schwartz and some other defensive coordinators, and see what they're doing different these days in scheming, so that he can add that to his playbook and then mix it all up and come up with something a little bit different than the typical Zimmer defensive attack. And McCarthy is going to have to be a much more creative on the offense as well, because what he's doing right now, to me, it seems like he's doing this basic play calling. You look at the Kansas City Chiefs, you look at the 49ers, look at these different plays that these guys are doing and making on offense. Look at how they're getting exotic, how they're coming up with different schemes that are breaking the mold from what we're accustomed to seeing. Seems like McCarthy is still sticking to the same playbook, every now and then throw in a little wrench, but nothing exotic. So if he can work on that side of the field and be a little bit more exotic, Zimmer can do the same thing and use some of this new coaching philosophy into it. We might be much better. But those defensive players, I know right now they're sitting back saying, whoa, we got a coach that's coming in. There's no nonsense. So we better be ready to bring our game.
Yeah. And that's the thing, as one, I feel like that with Dan Quinn, I feel like the smaller linebacker, I feel like that was him. Mm-hmm. And I don't feel like that was necessarily something that we did out of necessity. Like, I don't feel like that was something we did, converting these guys that were DBs to play linebacker. I think that was something Dan Quinn got a little cute with. I think it worked for a little while with Jaron Kearse the year before last. I thought Jaron Kearse had some times where he played good down in the box. Mm-hmm. And I think Dan Quinn thought, you know what? It worked there. I can do it with Marquise Bell. I can do it with, he started kind of tweaking some things, and it really came back to bite him. And I just think that was more of I think that was a personnel decision by Dan Quinn, honestly. And I think with Mike Zimmer, obviously, there's going to be a change in philosophy there, like immediately, right away, day one. I feel right off the gate, in my opinion, and I could be wrong, but I feel like that our target for the first round is probably going to be a linebacker. Mm-hmm. Now, they could go other ways. I have seen the mock draft where they've got the Florida State wide receiver that I think it's Keon Coleman.
Mm-hmm.
I believe.
Coleman, yeah, I think it's Coleman. Yeah.
I've seen him mocked at 24. But the thing is, there's some really good linebacker talent in this draft. There's quite a few of them out there. I think linebacker, though, is going to be a top priority. Now, whether that's going to be via draft or if it's going to be free agency. Mm-hmm. Ultra had said earlier about, the linebacker from Tampa Bay, White, that he's Devin a target. Yeah. And for, Devin White. Yeah. So I think that, there's going to be some big name linebackers out there in free agency. Mm-hmm. So it kind of goes to the point of, Jerry Jones, when he's talking about this whole all-in thing, right? How all in are you? Mm-hmm. And when are we going to see that? Free agency starts the first day of free agency, I believe, is March 3rd.
Yeah, I think it's before the draft.
It's before the draft. Yeah. Free agency starts, NFL free agency. I think it starts March 3rd. So what is the biggest, in your opinion, because we've got some questions on age along the offensive line. Obviously, Brandon Cooks is a guy who, don't know, is he coming? Is he going to come back? Are we going to have Stephon Gilmore? Are we bringing him back? What's your first thing? What's your first area that you think needs to be addressed in free agency that you would that you would start with?
If it were me, I would start with that offensive line. It's kind of aging and they're banged up. We need an offensive line to protect quarterback. We protect the quarterback, give them more time to find our receivers. But it's really going to depend on what the conversation Mike Zimmer has with Jerry Jones. I'm pretty sure because of their familiarity in the past working together, he's going to allow Zimmer a lot of input into defensive players that he wants to get in free agency or what he want to look for in the draft. And Jerry's going to have strong consideration in that because Van Der Esch, a lot of people thought because of Van Der Esch's neck injury that when he was out for a while and then he came back, they said, he needs to go. No, Van Der Esch played well when he got healthy and came back. He was playing well, but then he injured it again. I don't know what his future is like, but even if he was on the team this season, it would have made a tremendous difference because he's a true linebacker. So linebackers are a must at period. And I know Zimmer is going to see that. Like you said, he's going to say that is the biggest hole on defense right now are linebackers. I think our safeties and corners are decent. We can shore them up with a pick here and a pick there. But linebackers and maybe a couple of defensive linemen and schooling, mentoring the current defensive linemen we got now, the young ones, to play at their best potential, because I don't think they are right now. Tank is, I really feel this. I feel that Tank is on the verge of being traded or let loose. It's going to depend on when they have spring practice and all of that. I mean, when they start having practice before the season, that's what it's going to count on, because I didn't see much out of Tank. And when he did do something, I have to look and say, oh, that was Tank. But I didn't see much out of Tank. And I don't know if he's going to bring his game up because now Zimmer's there and he knows Zimmer doesn't take any slack, or if he's just at that point, I'm not stepping up for anybody like that. Let them trade me. So offensive line first, linebackers, and most definitely get us a running back. And I don't want them to trade Pollard. Don't get rid of Pollard. Keep Pollard because he's perfect for what he can do. Let's just get us another beast of a running back so we can have that duo again.
Yeah. Well, and there's definitely, for me, I think in free agency, one of the things that I look towards for me, I definitely do think the linebacker position, there's going to be some guys out there that needs to be addressed. Mine is running back. I think running back for sure. Ultra just said that about a running back, thinks that'll be addressed in free agency. Mm-hmm. I know there's a couple of big names that are the two biggest names anyway out there for running back, obviously, is Derrick Henry and you've got Saquon Barkley, both going to be free agents that are hitting the free agent market. Both of those guys are going to be somebody that I think probably Henry will probably be more along the lines of the guy that they'll look towards, just because of the fact that affordability in terms of what he may want for a contract. I think Saquon Barkley is probably looking for a little bit too much money. I like Saquon Barkley, me personally. His problem is injury history. So I think right there, though, you've got to kind of weigh your options and you look at it. Derrick Henry was pretty healthy this whole year, still had a productive season. He's a guy that you give him the rock and you pound it. Now, I would say that it's not out of the realm of possibility that Tony Pollard ends back up on this roster. I think you can rework a deal for Pollard, and you could bring Pollard back to this roster and have him resume the role that he had when Zeke was here. If you bring a guy in like Derrick Henry, and then all of a sudden Pollard gets back to his normal, he's the lightning, and you've got your guy that's the thunder in Derrick Henry. So for me, I'm thinking that the Cowboys, one of the first things that they address is running back, just because of the fact that I do not think they can afford to gamble on running back in the draft. I think they need a proven guy who they know can run the rock. It was a liability going into the season. It was a liability throughout the season. You saw it. I mean, Dak had a great season, successful season, throwing the ball, slinging the ball all over. But when it came time in the playoffs, we had all talked about it. I talked about it. Mike talked about it. You talked about it. Couldn't run the ball. We couldn't run the ball. And it came to fruition against, it came to fruition against Green Bay. We go into that Green Bay game and we can't run the ball. And if you want to be a team that's going to win, you got to at least be able to run the ball. I mean, look at Kansas. Look no further than Kansas City. Their season really kind of started to take a turn. They were struggling for a little bit.
They were.
But it started taking a turn when Pacheco started getting involved in that run game, and they really started cranking it up a notch. You see him start running the ball, good things happen. So, and I saw you kind of, do the thing over there with is your preferred back out of the two? Would it also be Derrick Henry?
Yeah, it'll be Derrick, and you were absolutely right about Saquon. I like Saquon, and I think he would have a chip on his shoulder from how the Giants didn't pay him if he came to the Cowboys to prove them wrong. But Saquon is injury riddled, and it'll be a shame if we waste that position on Saquon, who's a bona fide back, but then he's injured right away, and then that just hurts us. Derrick Henry is a beast, and like I said before, a change of venue remotivates people that some think are already past their peak. And Derrick Henry would love to put that star on, come to Dallas. It would remotivate him, and he would give us at least a minimum 2 good, solid years. But if we get rid of Pollard, it'd be like taking us 2 steps back and 1 step forward. I hate when we do that. We get to a season and we say, man, if we can just get a player here and a player there, but then we get them and then we get rid of somebody else in there that made those keys work. So some kind of way, Jerry, I know he's got a roster of people he's got to pay. He's got the Diggs, he's got CeeDee Lamb, he's got Pollard. He's got to pay some people. But you mentioned it earlier. If Jerry is all in, like he said he's all in, Jerry will go all in with a different mindset, find a way to make all this work, keep Pollard, get Derrick Henry, shore up that defensive line, offensive line, some linebackers, and you're going to automatically get some people out of the draft, and definitely go hard and heavy in free agency. I mean, the moment they need to be doing their homework now to be prepared in free agency to get some experienced beast on the defense.
Yeah, I agree. And I saw something in the chat. Steven had said something about Pollard, and he mentioned something about 10 million. But Pollard signed a franchise tag in the last offseason, so he is a free agent. He is not under contract with the Dallas Cowboys moving forward. And when free agency starts, he can sign with anybody else. We don't owe him any money. I've seen a couple mentions in the chat about Michael Gallup, and we can get out of his contract. Yeah. And that's something I'd be looking forward to doing just because of the fact that he has not been the same since that injury. He was not a contributor to this team at all. He's just a guy that just really had a disappointing year this year. He had a disappointing season last year. I know he was coming back from the injury. We all thought, maybe that he being fully healthy and having a full off season in training camp, we thought he'd come back and be rejuvenated, ready to roll. And he was not. So that's one of the things where when I look at, the draft and they're talking about wide receiver, why I wouldn't necessarily be against going to grab a wide receiver in the first round if that falls available. Now, at this point, I think that you look at offensive line, wide receiver, and depending on what you do in free agency, a lot of it's going to depend what you do in free agency. But obviously, wide receiver, offensive line, if you can go with the best available player there, if you've got an offensive lineman that you've got ranked higher, snag that guy if you've got a wide receiver. But I think we could definitely go for some help in the wide receiving core. I was trying to look it up, and maybe somebody in the chat knows, but I think Brandon Cooks is also a free agent this year. I think when we got him from Houston, he only had 1 year left on his deal.
Yeah, I think we signed him for 1 year, and Cooks is valuable to us. And I think we can keep Cooks. I don't think we're going to have to pay him a whole bunch. I think you ought to keep Cooks. But Gallup, sometimes I wonder, was it Gallup or was it Dak relying more on CeeDee Lamb and spreading the ball around? So because when the plays we're watching it from the television. We see plays going, and every now and then when he throw the ball to Gallup's that acrobatic receiver, but we don't see if Gallup was open and Dak just wasn't paying him attention. And it's kind of up in the air with me about Gallup because I don't know if Gallup had a bad season because he wasn't getting open, or it's because Dak just wasn't throwing him the ball. Because I know when you're throwing the ball, Gallup will catch those balls that most people don't have that flexibility to catch. So I'm kind of up in the air with that. But if you're going to get rid of Gallup, if he decides to trade him, don't get rid of Brandon Cooks. Keep that experience with Brandon Cooks. And then if you're going to go out there and get another receiver, get him. That Florida State receiver, I don't think he'll be available by the time we draft. That dude is hot. I don't think he'll be available.
Cooks is actually still under contract through 2024, so we've got him. Good. He's going to be he could come back, and so yeah, I agree with you. He was a productive wide receiver. Him and Dak really started developing their chemistry after that San Francisco game, and so he's going to be a guy that's going to be a good wide receiver. You know, continue to be a productive wide receiver. Having a second year in the same offensive philosophy under McCarthy, I think will do him wonders, and I think you'll see him, you know, have another really good season. But we definitely need to figure out that number 3 spot, because right now I don't think there's a solid number 3 there. I don't think that it's Gallup. I haven't seen enough from Jalen Tolbert to put my faith in him. He had a few decent plays last year, but not enough for you to say that, you know, he's going to step in and be your number 3 guy. And yeah, they said he's not going to be a free agent until 2025. So yeah, he's under contract through this year. So somebody asked earlier in the chat, and they asked, what was our bigger worry? They said DQ not being on this defense, his lack of presence on this defense, or his presence in Washington. That's kind of a good question.
Yeah, it is.
So I'll let you go with that first. What do you think? Well, do you think it's the lack of him coaching this defense, or do you think we should be more worried about him being in Washington?
No, I like DQ when he was winning and the defense was on fire. But the big games that we needed, look at the big games that we lost when they say, well, Dallas can't beat the big teams. Well, defense. And DQ didn't come through in those games. And those are the games we need defense to show up. And we got walloped. And we got walloped because of the defense. They scored more points, a lot of points. So I'm not mad that DQ's gone. The thing that gets to me is that Washington is smart. Washington saw the success we were making. They're starting over. Washington got rid of players. They're starting over. So why not start off Dan Quinn as their head coach, because he's bringing the secrets from Dallas to him? Why not get Joe Witt, because he's also on the coaching staff. He's bringing Dallas with him. And one of the players on the Skins was reaching out to Michael Parsons, talking about, hey, we got room for you over. That ain't happening. But I can see Washington. I can see why Washington did it, because who's the most successful, one of the most successful teams in that division that they're in? Us. So if they can pull away as many coaches and maybe possible players from us, they can prime the pump for what they're rebuilding. And Dan Quinn would be a good start for them rebuilding. Why? Because he's playing against us in the same division, and he knows how we play. He knows how to attack us. If Zimmer can change that, then Dan Quinn will have some competition he'll have to face.
Yeah, and so for me, I mean, that's a loaded question, because I feel like it's a disservice to the Cowboys to answer either one of those questions, because if I say that I'm more concerned about his lack of presence on our defense, that's me saying that I had confidence in Dan Quinn going forward. I wanted Dan Quinn. Yeah. I referred it during the game. I said, if I was Jerry Jones, I'd be lovingly bubble wrapping Dan Quinn's shit in his office as we speak, right? I wanted Dan Quinn gone the minute the clock hit zeros, because I thought that was an inexcusable performance by his defense. Right. They weren't ready. He didn't make adjustments. He was out there having them play zone. He had Parsons out there in coverage looking like he's lost. So for me to think that he's going to go into Washington and all of a sudden Washington's going to become a formidable team that we should have to worry about, I don't buy that. I think that Dan Quinn is Ron Rivera 2.0. I think he is going to struggle. I think that, their defense might improve a little bit, but I think they've still got questions offensively. I still don't think that they have the talent to compete right now in the NFC East. Right, and I don't think Washington's going to be patient enough to keep Dan Quinn around to find out. I think Dan Quinn's probably a 2, 2-year max guy, maybe 3. And in my opinion, I think if Dan Quinn doesn't get this thing turned around pretty quickly in Washington, they're pretty impatient about what's going on there. They've been having losing season after losing season after losing season. And meanwhile, they're watching a team like the Giants go to the playoffs with Daniel Jones.
Yeah, that was something, wasn't it?
Yeah, so I mean, if you're Washington, I don't know how much patience and I don't know how long the leash is on Dan Quinn, but like I say, I feel like it's a disservice to answer those questions because I really don't. Dan Quinn don't scare me. Is he head coach? Does he scare you?
No, he doesn't. He doesn't scare me at all. And like I said, for them to be rebuilding and they got new ownership, new management, they figured Dan Quinn is a great start. But that doesn't mean Dan Quinn is going to go in there instantly going to start competing for the division. Oh, no. He's a great start to get them on the ground with this new management, new ownership. Because, during the season, they got rid of their defensive players. It's like they were dumping the load so they can start buying that new team and start rebuilding. So it's going to take them a few years. But you're right. Dan Quinn will probably be there about maybe 2 years because they'll probably, after the first year, they'll still be head coach searching for the future. And they still got to go out and get talent on that defense. So no matter what Dan Quinn does as the head coach, then again, who's going to be his defensive coordinator? Because he won't be calling the defense full time like he did with us, even though he doesn't have the skilled players. Who's going to be his defensive coordinator? They got rid of Bieniemy. I think Bieniemy was the offensive coordinator. They got rid of Bieniemy. Yeah. So they're starting from scratch. Dan Quinn doesn't scare me at all. I think he'll make the same mistakes with Washington he's made with us because he hadn't learned from Atlanta. But as far as we're concerned, McCarthy and I'm sure they're thinking this, they know what Dan Quinn is taking to Washington. So don't let those few secrets he take to him hurt us by you sticking to the same offensive schemes you've been sticking to this year. Yeah. Change some things up, get some players back there, running backs. Don't go 2 steps forward with a Henry if we get him, 3 steps back and let Pollard get out the door. I know it's going to be hard to try to keep him because if he's a free agent, a lot of people are going to probably pay him more than what Jerry wants to pay him. So if you do that, now we got to go get somebody else for the 1-2 punch because we can't just have him back there by himself with Lipke or Dowdle. So it's going to be interesting to see what we do in free agency, in the draft, how we maneuver that. What do we do when Jerry has to start paying these players? Is he going to make that one big mistake he does every year to sabotage the team? Or how is it going to happen? But the Dan Quinn situation, I guess you're right. No matter how you answer it, it doesn't spell success for Washington.
Yeah. And that's the thing. Somebody pointed out about, Washington, basically it's a total new regime. He said they realize it's going to take time. He said he thinks that they're going to try to trade up for the number 1 pick and get a QB. Now, my thing is, even if they do that though, even if they do trade up and they got themselves a new QB, is Dan Quinn the guy that you want to help develop a QB? He's a defensive guy. So you're talking about a defensive minded coach trying to develop a rookie QB. I don't know of very many situations that's worked out. Right. Typically if you bring in a guy like you brought in a Patrick Mahomes, it worked well right off the bat because you had a guy in Andy Reid who was able to get quite a bit out of Alex Smith and make that a playoff team with Alex Smith. Then, obviously he molded molded Patrick Mahomes. I think Mahomes was already a great quarterback, but I don't know if we see Mahomes as great as he is now or as great as he is as quickly as he is if he doesn't have an Andy Reid type coach. Right. Same thing with Brock Purdy. You look at Brock Purdy, Kyle Shanahan. He's one of the best, offensive guys, offensive minded. He's a guy that works well with quarterbacks. So if you're going to be putting your resources and putting your, you put all your eggs in a basket to say, hey, we can get a quarterback here. That's all we're missing. Then I think Washington would be ill-fated to do that because I don't see Dan Quinn being the guy to develop a rookie quarterback. I don't see that happening. I don't know about you, but I don't either. It doesn't success to me.
Yeah. And if anything, they're going to ruin them because that rookie quarterback, if he's a number 1 or if he's a top 5 pick, you bring him into Washington, no protection, no defense. So he's going to be on the field a lot. He doesn't have anybody to mentor him and bring him in. Like you said, Andy Reid is proven. And Quinn is not that type of person you'll look to first to develop a quarterback. you're going to get that guy killed. You're going to get him killed. You're going to ruin his season. Ruin his career right off the bat. And by the time you do get it together, he may be a has-been. So Washington isn't really anything we need to worry about.
Yeah.
We really need Jerry to listen to Zimmer, listen to McCarthy, and tell them, when he tells them I'm all in, that means he's all ears as well. And if he's all ears, when they tell him, look, we can get this linebacker, we can get this so-and-so, listen this time. Don't be that old mentality. I'm all in, but I buy the groceries. I cook the meal. Can't be that. Jerry, all in means you really have to put your ego in check and look in the mirror and convince yourself that the words are coming out of your mouth are exactly what you're going to change to become. Because they can't just come out your mouth and it's the same old Jerry.
Yeah, and so and what do you feel about I was just thinking about it. We got Dan Quinn over there in Washington, right? So now you've got Kellen Moore, offensive coordinator for Philadelphia, right? We saw what he did in Dallas. We saw he went out to Los Angeles and wasn't able to really do anything with Herbert. Everybody was saying he's going to turn that into a top offense. They didn't retain his services. Harbaugh decides he's going to go in a different direction. Mm-hmm. What do you think, if any, impact that Kellen Moore is going to have being the offensive coordinator now in the, for the Eagles?
Kellen Moore was good because he came right off the field with us and then went into it. And if you remember, they were talking about him when he first came to Dallas as a offensive coordinator, about how he used to just sit there and just design plays on a scratch piece of paper, because he got exotic. He got different. When Kellen Moore was with us, initially we were doing plays that nobody else was doing. And that had everybody off balance. And then he'll throw another wrench in there, and everybody was shook. But then next season, all of a sudden, people realize, okay, we know Kellen Moore. He draws up these different exotic plays. So let's kind of be prepared for that. He doesn't stick to the familiarity that much. And then it ran its course. A new car on the street, everybody's raving about it. After you've seen it about 2 years, well, we've seen that. It's, oh, look at this over here. We got one just like it. He went over to the Chargers. He's not a quarterback developer. He is a play scheme exotic designer. But it didn't work there, because by that time, everybody's aware of Kellen Moore. Now, he's going to go to Philadelphia. I don't know why they got rid of their offensive coordinator. Well, I guess he took another job. But that was one of the biggest mistakes that the Eagles made, by letting that offensive coordinator get away. Because long as Hurts was back there, it was working for him. And now they went and got Matt Patricia. Matt Patricia has proven that if he is not under Bill Belichick, he's straight trash. And I think they're going to get rid of Matt Patricia, or they got rid of him. But I'm not worrying much about Kellen Moore. I'm not worried about Kellen Moore much at all, because all those exotic plays are going to create turnovers. And if the wrong people handle that ball, trying to flip it and throw it here, or do the jet sweep / comeback, sooner or later, those are going to be turnovers. So I'm not worried about Kellen Moore. I'm really not worried about Philadelphia either, because I bet several of their players are going to leave for the money, and some of them are going to say, look, it takes too much to get to the Super Bowl again. This season was awful for us. Let me go out and get that big check before I get out of here. Let me look at – I wouldn't be surprised if a couple of players come to Dallas, if we reach out to a couple of players and come to Dallas.
Well, I feel like that with Kellen Moore, it's going to be interesting to see what he does with a guy like Jalen Hurts, because I feel like with a quarterback like Jalen Hurts, you have to have a scheme where Jalen Hurts is not a guy who's going to drop back and throw it 30 times a game. He's not a guy that's going to do that. He's just not a he's a guy that you need to bring in a coordinator where you're going to emphasize in some run plays. You're going to have some RPO. And that just, to me, doesn't seem like Kellen Moore. It hasn't been his. That's not his forte. It's not what he did in Dallas. It's not what he, I mean, and if you think about it, you look this year, you actually saw more plays with Dak involved in the run this year than any other year previous.
Mm-hmm.
Kellen Moore was the guy that kind of took that away and just didn't really, he wanted to throw the ball. He wanted to light it up.
Right.
He wanted to, and I feel like if that's the offensive philosophy that he's taking with him into Philadelphia, I think it's going to be a long year for Philadelphia. I think there's going to be a lot of crying, head banging, and head scratching on why they made that hire. It was a very peculiar hire to me that they went that route. But I do think that it speaks volumes to some of the successes that Dallas has had, considering that the fact that the rest of the NFC East is trying to poach our coaches, right? They want to get Kellen Moore as their offensive coordinator. The Eagles want to try to. They saw what he did with Dak, and they're like, you know what? We want Hurts to be more like Dak. You know, we got Dan Quinn in there with Washington. We want our defense to mimic Dallas's defense. So you've got these NFC East teams that really, as much as they talk bad about the Cowboys, they sure are, grabbing a lot of guys that are trying to be a whole lot like the Dallas Cowboys.
Yep.
That's funny to see that.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
Because when you were talking, I was thinking, if you think about it, these teams in the NFC East are snatching up our coaches, because they're thinking, look at the success Dallas had in spite of losing the 5 critical games they needed. Look at success they had. And to get a little bit more familiarity with them, let's go get Kellen Moore. Let's get Dan Quinn. Let's get Joe Witt. And I don't think the desire to pull from us is over yet. Because I wouldn't be surprised if one of them tried to pull Al Harris from us. I wouldn't be surprised a bit.
Yeah, well, we denied. They did try to talk to Al Harris, and Jerry Jones blocked it. So we're keeping it. Jerry Jones blocked that and said he is not having, basically just said, nope. The Washington Commanders did request to interview him, and Jerry said, absolutely not. He's under contract. Mm-hmm. You can't interview him. Ultra just tweeted here, man, that Darren Woodson did not make the Hall of Fame.
Oh, man.
He missed out. So,
I know he's disappointed.
That's a bummer to see, man. You start to wonder, though, how many times has Woodson been up for the Hall of Fame? Is this his?
I don't know if I don't know how many times he's been considered. I've only heard about his name in the media speaking about him being considered about maybe 2 years. He may have been considered before then. But Kelly, what gets me about the Hall of Fame, you remember our Cowboys
second
with the Doomsday defense with Roger Staubach and all those players. Man, There were so many players on that team that should be in the Hall of Fame that blows my mind. And it seems like the players from the 70s and back, especially the 70s, the Hall of Fame either has new blood on their committees or they forgot, because those players. Because look at how many first-time ballots and first-time players going to the Hall of Fame now. They've probably only been out of the league 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years, and these players that been out for 20 and 30 years who are household names. Yeah. And they're not even being considered. I don't get it.
Well, I just looked it up real quick. It's his second time. This is his second time in a row that he's been nominated and been denied. Doesn't mean it's not a definitive for him. It doesn't mean that he's not going to get in. I think eventually Darren gets in. I mean, you listen to the guys that played with him. Some of the guys that we've brought in, some of the guys that we've interviewed. A guy like George Teague that played with him.
Mm-hmm.
You talk to just any former Dallas Cowboy that has played alongside a guy like Woodson. James Washington, when we interviewed him, he talked about how great he was. I mean, Darren Woodson is the greatest safety to ever play for the Cowboys, period.
Well,
And
him and Everson Walls.
Yeah. But when you look at what Darren Woodson did, though, when he came in, and you look at the fact that he was able to play the safety position, both safety positions, he was able to come down and play nickel corner. I mean, you just didn't see that out of guys. Right. He was one of the first. He was one of the first of his kind to really come in and do that. And the way that he played for that Cowboys defense, and that he was a cornerstone on that defense for as long as he was, won multiple championships. I just, we haven't had a safety like Woodson since, still to this day.
Right. That's right. That's right.
And I'm gonna be honest with you. I'm on the table all the time, banging the table for us to draft a good young safety, in one of the top rounds of the draft, so that we can get that position covered up, because I think that position's been lacking a little bit for the Cowboys in the last several years. We just don't have that guy back there that, hey man, that's a guy who's running. He's the general of the secondary. Yep. He's calling the defensive adjustments back there. You don't have a guy like that, and Darren Woodson was that guy. He did it at a very high level, and he did it for a very, very long time. So
he did.
I think that it's a shame that he did not get nominated, but at the same time, I don't think it's the end all be all for Darren.
It's just been this just his second time, so he's going to get in there. But one of the key points you mentioned was about that field general, because Everson Walls was a field general. Woodson was the last safety field general we had, and he won 3 Super Bowls with the Cowboys. Yeah. And after that, we've had some plug-and-play people, but not field generals. And you're right, we need somebody to come in like that. He's definitely a Hall of Famer, but it's just like some of the other players. It's going to take maybe 3, 4, 5 years, because you look at Chris Carter for the Vikings and the Eagles. It took him so long, but one of the reasons it took him so long, remember Peter King, the sports analyst / writer? Peter King once said, "I'll never vote for Chris Carter because of how Chris Carter treated me during the interview." You don't even play the game, Peter King, and you're a voter, but you're going to do that to a prolific Hall of Famer. And this man had to wait so many years to get in. Woodson doesn't have the controversial background like Chris Carter, so Woodson's going to get in there. He's probably a little disappointed, but Woodson's going to get in there. The big thing is his name is out there. It's been twice that he's been up front. He's going to get in. It's just a matter of time.
Well, I'm ready for him to get in, just because he's one of my favorite players back in the 90s. I mean, a lot of people with the offense. Obviously, Emmitt Smith was one of my guys. Darren Woodson, though, I had a Darren Woodson jersey. Darren Woodson was my guy. In fact, I've been meaning to get a new – I think that is going to be – I purchase a new jersey every single year. I try to get at least one, sometimes 2. But I think this year I'm going to have to go and finally fork over the dough and get that Darren Woodson jersey. Yeah. But I got a clip that I want to play. This is a sound clip here. And this was from this actually was today. This was on First Take. DeMarcus Lawrence went on First Take. And he had some things to say that really riled up Cowboys Nation. So I want the chat to listen. I know you said you hadn't heard this yet, so I'm gonna play this. Here we go.
You mentioned how you wish your team was here. What happened and why your team isn't here?
All honesty, I think the main thing is we was burned out, man. Long season, team dominantly healthy throughout the season. The legs get tired, but also you got to give hats off to Green Bay, man. They came out with a great game plan, rolling out towards Micah and then running away from me. I feel like, that's what they needed to, get their game started, and they jumped on us fast. And
what about adjustments?
Yeah, adjustments, man. Feel like we went in the locker room and, we came out, ready with our adjustments, but still didn't go the way that we planned it to go.
You mentioned how you wish your team was
that's what he said today on First Take. And he's been getting pretty lit up on social media. And for me, rightfully so. I mean, when I first heard that, my first thought is there's a lot of things you could have said as a defensive player or as a player, period. Being burnt out is not one of them. That's basically like you going to your coach if you've ever played at any level of competitive sports, and you're having a hard practice, and you tell your coach, I'm tired. And see what that coach tells you. Anybody that's ever played in competitive sports knows, one, that is never an excuse. Being burnt out, being tired, it made me cringe. It made me be embarrassed. And for a guy who comes out there and talks about being a bully and wanting to hit people in the mouth and this and that, that was a very weak, a very soft response. And I don't know, man. What's your first reaction when you hear that from DeMarcus Lawrence, a guy that's one of our more tenured guys on defense, a guy that's looked at as a physical guy? What do you think when you hear that?
Man, he sounds like a quitter. Even in his voice, even the inflection in his voice, the way he said it, it sounded like he just didn't really give a damn. It was like, yeah, we got burnt out. First of all, when he said burnt out, you are in the NFL, and you come out saying burnt out. I would have said, and my ankle was hurt. Anything than saying that. He was burnt out, and then he says, well, props to Green Bay. They did this, and they ran away from me. No, they didn't. They ran through you, Tank. They didn't run away from you. I've always remember sometimes I said during the season, I said, Tank got to show up in this game. Tank's got to show up in this game. When Tank did something in a game, the way I noticed Tank was there was all of a sudden they said, Tank Lawrence just did this. And I said, oh, Tank's in the game. I didn't even notice he was there. When Micah Parsons is double teamed, like I've said over and over, when Micah Parsons is double teamed and he still manages to get to the quarterback, sack him or get close, and I'm still looking for Tank to come around the other end and close the book, and he's never there, then I know that there's a problem. And this explains it. He sounds lazy. He sounds like he's just complacent. And he sounds like, well, you know, it is what it is. I wasn't really all that motivated to try to go to the Super Bowl anyway and put it all out on the field. So I'm just going to tell you, we were burnt out. We was the biggest mistake he said. What he should have said was I. Tank was talking about himself, not the rest of the team. But if he said I, he puts the emphasis and spotlight on himself so coaches can say, okay, you burnt out. We're going to burn you away. But when you said we, you're almost trying to make it seem like all of us in. Remember this old joke somebody said, you rob a bank, you in the bushes, and the police come and they catch you, and then you step out and they take you to the car, they don't see nobody else, and then you say, come on, Kelly, they got us both. You know, that's what Tank sound like. It was Tank, but now he's throwing the rest of the team in there as a we. The rest of the team wasn't burnt out. He was burnt out. He was complacent. He had no desire and oomph to go out and give it his best. And for saying something like that, as talented as he is, it wouldn't bother me a bit if they say, we're going to trade you and send a message
Well, I'm gonna pause real quick. We got from the Lunatic, we got a super chat here. Thank you for the super chat. He says, Zim is the DC, now spend some money in free agency. Urgency DC 4L. So thanks for the super chat there, Lunatic. We got some work to do. Hopefully Zimmer comes in and gets that done. First and foremost, hopefully Zimmer was watching that interview and saw the response to that, because my first thing I'm thinking is if I see that and I'm a defensive coordinator, I'm sitting down with you and I'm thinking to myself, is this a guy that I want on my team? I'm going to sit down and I'm going to have a legit conversation with him and say, what did you mean by that? What did you mean about burnt out? Because there is no burning out in the NFL. There is no burnout because every single other team plays the same damn amount of games that you are. They're playing the same amount of minutes. They're getting paid the same. In fact, you're getting paid and compensated very well, DeMarcus Lawrence, for you to be coming up here and giving me some BS about you being burnt out. Now, listen, there are some people that talked about the fact that said, that said that maybe DeMarcus Lawrence was just, trying to take, there was some things going on that he didn't want to give them ammunition to the Cowboys. If that's the case, fine. Say anything other than that.
Right.
But you can't sit there and tell me you're burnt out. That's basically you tapping your head, telling the coach, I got to come out the game, coach. I got to come out the game. There is no burning out in the NFL.
That's right.
It's one of the worst responses that I've seen, and it's going across social media. It's embarrassing. It's going to be one of those things that trends. They probably make memes, gifs, and everything else of it. Burnt out, What are you burnt out from? It was the first round of the playoffs, man.
Yeah.
Football team. What are you burnt out on, man? If anything,
right.
you play to get to this point in the playoffs, and you telling me you burn out?
I know it.
I can't. I don't know, man. I cannot for the life of me imagine why he would say that on national television, and that was the response that he thought he should give on a show like First Take, where Stephen A. Smith don't need no more ammunition.
He sure don't. He sure don't. Him or Shannon. And it's amazing because everything he said after that just sound weak. He didn't talk as though he was legitimately, intelligently talking about facts of what happened. Like, well, did this? He just kind of, we were burnt out and ran in, and props to Green Bay. They came out with a good game, and then they ran away from me. You can tell he's trying to protect himself. They didn't run away from Tank. They did not run away from Tank. They ran
away from Parsons.
They ran over and through you. And then
they ran away from Parsons, and when they ran at Parsons, they chipped Parsons because they knew that there wasn't nobody else that was on that side that was going to get him. So I don't know. I feel like that was a very weak response. I thought you got to go watch the clip too, though, because in the clip he's kind of smiling, got a little sheepish look on his face, whatever. I just don't think it's just not the response you can get. When you put up the kind of performance that we put up, our defense put up as a collective whole, that this team put out on the field against Green Bay, you've got fans out here who are out for blood. You've got fans who want people's jobs. You want guys gone, including myself. I wanted Dan Quinn the hell out of there. I don't know why the hell we let him interview for all these damn jobs before we'd have fired his ass to begin with. But it is what it is. But you got to be smarter than that. So, and I get that. Somebody here says David says that D-Law is one of the physical guys. Don't worry about D-Law. He's a badass. I don't necessarily think he's not a badass, but I think that right there screams soft and weak mentality. It really does. It don't sound good. It don't look good. It don't sound good. After you see the performance that was put out on the field, none of that, you don't want to hear that. You don't.
Nope.
And yes, I agree with Ultra about Marcus Lawrence being one of the best run stoppers. Yes, he has been one of the best run stoppers. He wasn't stopping the run against Green Bay, though.
Sure wasn't. And
he wasn't stopping it when Aaron Jones was running up and down the field, and Aaron Jones was getting, and I'm not putting that all on DeMarcus Lawrence. Not putting it all on DeMarcus Lawrence. Right. I'm just saying that's a response that you can't have to say that you are burnt out. And you know what? I don't like that answer. And he's getting crucified on social media, and rightfully so. He should be.
His publicist,
because you can't.
His publicist.
What's that?
His publicist or agent is probably screaming right now about him saying that. I mean, they're probably saying, man, in the history of NFL, I don't remember anybody saying that. And if anybody...
Never heard that.
No, and if anybody, Tank should be the field general of the defense. If anybody, he should be the field general. He's sitting in the locker room saying, and we just going to punch him in the mouth and keep on punching him and punching him. And then you turn around later, we were burnt out. Come on now. That's an oxymoron. How do you say this and then you turn around and say we burnt out? And whatever was going across your mind, the way you said it, no intelligent facts came after that about your scheme.
Nothing.
Or we tried to do this, but this didn't work. You just gave some generalizations after that. And then it's the we that we didn't do, but then it's the I when you say Green Bay avoided you. No, Tank. They looked at you and say, you ain't a tank. You a blow-up dog, and we're going to go right through you. So it wasn't no we, and then they ran away from me. That was arrogant to say, and they get schemed and run away from me. I don't remember any pregame interviews by anybody saying the person they're worrying about on defense is Tank Lawrence. If anything, Michael Parsons will come up. That's why they double-team Mike Parsons. They didn't double-team you, and they ran away from you. Aaron Jones was hurt. and he still played and had historical numbers on him. So that woo, Tank, man, you lost some respect for me.
David in the chat, I just want to get to this real quick, said maybe he was trying to say that DQ is not making the adjustments and just wasn't the guy. It was time for a DC change. Well, if that's the case, just say it. Dan Quinn's gone. Dan Quinn is with the Washington Commanders at this point. You're not burning any bridges. You're not saving face by saying that. If that's the case, and if you lost confidence in your defensive coordinator, just say it. I mean, there's guys that come out all the time and go for, and sit there and say, hey, I didn't like the plays that the coach was calling. I didn't like the scheme was not good. There's guys all the time that come out and call their coordinators out. All I'm saying is it was a poor choice of words for DeMarcus Lawrence. Now, again, am I condemning DeMarcus Lawrence and saying all of a sudden now he is this horrible player that he's just, completely, inept at his job? No, I'm not saying that. All I'm saying, you got a new defensive coordinator coming in. To say that you were burnt out is not a good look. If I'm a defensive coordinator, I'm coming in there and one of the first things I'm talking. And what have we talked about? This ever since this happened, what have we talked about? And when we played, we've talked about the culture, and we've talked about, is this culture where it needs to be? Right. Because if you have developed and if you have built and if you thrive off a culture of physicality, of tough, hard-nosed nature, we're going to be the bullies. We're going to go out there. We're going to play a physical brand of football, and we're going to beat you. That's not a response that you get if that's the kind of culture that you have. So in my opinion, that response to me, it just kind of speaks more to the culture, which hopefully we got a guy in Zimmer. Yeah. Hopefully he comes in and hopefully he starts to change it. So, I don't know. I know that Ultra said that he mentioned in the chat a couple of times that, maybe they just, maybe they quit on Dan Quinn. That's a possibility. Yeah. But even at that, even if they quit on Quinn, again, I would rather him come out and just say that. Right. Honestly, if they came out and they said, you know what, Dan Quinn, he came out running zone. We don't know what the hell he was thinking. And honestly, we didn't have no damn confidence in him. And as far as adjustments, he didn't make none. Yeah. He came out with the same BS he had in the first half. He sure did. He had us still running that. He had us running zone instead of man. We weren't blitzing. We were, say what you want, but just saying that you're burnt out, don't do it for me. I'm sorry, it doesn't do it for a lot of other people, and I understand why they're upset. So in Cowboys Nation, if you're a Cowboys player and you wear the star on the side of your helmet, you have to understand that optics is huge when you're playing in Dallas. And the things that you say have to be thought about and carefully worded, because if you word them the wrong ways, they're going to twist them. But I mean, honestly, there's no even need to twist those words right there. Those words should have never come out your mouth. So it's just wasn't a good look. I didn't like it. But hey, it is what it is. Like I said, we got a new defensive coordinator. Zimmer's going to come in here. He's good. Obviously, we hired him tonight. Hopefully, he is in the building already and saying, hey, I want to start meeting with some of these players. I want to sit down and talk with Micah Parsons. Because what I think is important with a new defensive coordinator is sitting down, and I'm sure he'll do this, but is sitting down with each player individually along that defense and asking them, how do you want your role defined, right? Like, what do you want in this out of this defense? What do you want? Like, find out these players' strengths, find out their goal, find out if Michael Parsons is actually wanting to play some of that off the ball linebacker that he said that he was never asked to do. He said, I only play where they put me. Right. Okay. Well, if that's the case, maybe he wants to play a little bit off the ball linebacker. Maybe he doesn't want to be in every down. Maybe he doesn't want to be playing off that defensive end where he's getting hit and he's getting chipped, and at the end of the season, it wears him down. Find that out from him. We don't know that because he has never really come out and said that. But if you're Mike Zimmer, sit down, start talking to these guys. Hopefully he's in the building and putting in work right now, because that's what we want is him to come in and put in work and start to transform this defense. Yeah, and I think he will. And I think he's already talking to him. But one thing Tank did for sure, the spotlight is now on you, Tank. Now,
when you have opening season practice, this next season come up, everybody's going to put the spotlight on you to see exactly what you're doing that contributes to that problem. And Zimmer is definitely going to change the culture. The 70s, we had a culture that you can define that was part of us winning. In the 90s, a culture that you could define that was part of us winning. Now we don't have a culture. Zimmer can put that culture in there. They may not like how he institutes it, a lot of the players, but eventually when they see the fruits of that labor, they'll come on board and understand you're in the NFL not just to look good, you're in the NFL to win and win big. And he'll define that culture. I'm really going to start paying attention to Tank Lawrence and see how receptive he is to that culture, see how receptive he is to being the man on defense and what he does now that he has the spotlight on him so we can see if it's a we or you.
Exactly. You know, and one last thing just to kind of touch on what I think is interesting as far as what they've decided to put, because I don't think that, you know, let's just face it, Jerry Jones is the one that's making these hiring decisions, right? It was the guy that brought in Dan Quinn. He's the guy that brought in now Mike Zimmer. That's two now back-to-back defensive coordinators that have head coaching experience.
Mm-hmm.
I think that within this front office, I think that they like Mike McCarthy, but I think that they feel more comfortable putting him and kind of surrounding him with guys that have more experience, have some head coaching experience for McCarthy to lean on.
Mm-hmm.
Guys that have had that leadership role. Just because, you know, there's something about Mike McCarthy that I like Mike McCarthy. I'm not saying I'm not a Mike McCarthy fan, but there's just something about him at times that makes you wonder, is he the guy to build a winning culture in Dallas? You know, I don't know. You know, I mean, he obviously won a Super Bowl in Green Bay, but he did have Aaron Rodgers. And I will say, you know, Aaron Rodgers hasn't won one without him.
Yeah.
I've said that. I do say that a lot, but I do think it's something to be said for the fact that the Cowboys did decide to go with a guy like Zimmer. I think that Zimmer, honestly, I think that he was probably a guy that they looked at from the jump, and they probably wanted him from the jump. And he's probably a guy they had their eye on, and I feel like they locked in on him and wanted him. If they really wanted to get a different defensive coordinator, a guy with a little bit of youth that they thought maybe could be a guy, they could go out and get one of these up-and-comers, but they let Dan Quinn interview for a million jobs before deciding on their defensive coordinator. So, it is what it is. So, but yeah, I don't know that somebody asked if I think that, you know, Mike didn't have any say. I don't think that Mike didn't have some say in the hire. I think, though, ultimately it came down to McCarthy. And I did hear, I forgot, was it you that was telling me that you had heard that?
Yeah, I heard
that
McCarthy. I heard that McCarthy wanted Rivera. Jerry wanted Zimmer. Jerry wanted Zimmerman because, you know, Zimmerman was on the coaching staff in the past. But and speaking of that, general managers today in the NFL, they're really smart about scouting what's out there and finding the plug and play players. Jerry isn't out in the streets like most general managers are now out there, because that's their sole job for player personnel. Jerry is wearing all these hats, but he's not fulfilling the responsibility of those hats. He's just going off of instinct, and instinct isn't working. I'm telling you, he really, really needs a general manager whose 100% focus is on stuff like that, finding those players, finding those youth coaches, those needles in the haystack. Jerry's not, his vision is like this. The typical general manager for a team is like this, because that's their job. Jerry has the title, but he's not fulfilling the title the way the current general managers are. And we need that separate entity to go out there and seek those type of players. Philly, 49ers, Ravens, Kansas City, Buffalo. I mean, we can go down the line. Their general managers, their primary focus is going out there finding those players during the season. Go out there finding those young and upcoming coaches. Look at Kyle Shanahan and Mike LaFleur. Look at their past. They all came up together, and they went from this team to team as different coaches. And then all of a sudden, those coaches, general managers, saw what these guys had developed and become. The McVays, who was a water boy. They saw what they became when they all were together, and they said, boom, he's a head coach, make him over there, put him over there, and they're successful. Jerry doesn't see that. He doesn't see those guys. He doesn't see that future in those guys. He's still thinking, like you said, get somebody with some coaching experience to put around McCarthy and some people that are similar to his age and his era. But Jerry doesn't see what other general managers see. And Jerry, I'm telling you, Jerry knows it, but that ego won't allow him. If Jerry can step back finally and give a general manager, scout a general manager out there and give them the opportunity, I guarantee you we'll see the fruits of those labors in about 2 years. But until he does that, it's not going to work because he doesn't have that eye, that experience to go out there as the current general managers are doing to get those players and those coaches to line on the staff. And that is critical. It's critical putting together a winning team.
Or letting, going out there and saying, hey, I'm going to hire a head coach. This is the guy that I want. And hey, you know what? You bring your guys along and you have your staff. You bring your staff, you build your staff. This is all you. But it is what it is. Yeah. I get it. So, and I know it's that. And David says, Jerry hired JJ. We're not complaining about that. Yeah. Well, Jerry's also the reason JJ's not with us no more too. So let's not forget that.
If he kept him, who knows what we would have had back then.
Yeah, exactly. And that's probably the greatest thing that Jerry has got credit for is bringing Jimmy Johnson along. But after that, I don't know. He hasn't really done a whole bunch. But guys, we've been going here for a little bit over an hour tonight. We somehow made it through the show without Mike. He was missed, but he will be back at his regular time next Thursday. I actually think we are doing with Boys in the Zone. EJ Savage is going to be a multi-streaming platform event. It's going to be the Cowboys Cave with Boys in the Zone, EJ Savage next Thursday night. So make sure you guys tune in. Thank you for everybody up in the chat. Make sure that if it's your first time coming in, make sure you like and subscribe. And hey, thanks for tuning in, guys. We're gonna keep rolling this thing out. We've got some good things coming, some more interviews. We've got one piece of the puzzle put in place. That's our defensive coordinator. Right. Mike Zimmer is the guy moving forward. We'll have to see where things go from here. We still got some moves to be made. Free agency, I looked it up, starts March 13th. So March 13th, this Dallas Cowboys team can go to work and start putting some more pieces of the puzzle together, and we'll see what we can do. But, right now, Mike Zimmer's the guy. I don't hate it. Greg don't hate it. You guys don't hate it. Let's go, man. It can't get no worse. So Cowboys Nation, we will be back. Greg, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Kelly.
Until next time, Cowboys Nation.
See ya.
Have a good one.
What's up, Cuts?